BUDDHADHAMMA 11.10, Chapter 11.10, Part 1, Practical Application. Today we're going to read page 1178 through 1191. A, B, and C. A, summon wisdom to deal with suffering. So summon panya to deal with dukkha. B, practice being free from dukkha. Practice being free from suffering. And C, happiness in the household. So sukha in the household. Part 1, Chapter 11.10, BUDDHADHAMMA. A, summon wisdom to deal with suffering. In the development of happiness, it is important not to neglect the term dukkha, suffering. An acknowledgement is made that suffering exists and that it is both placed in opposition to and paired alongside happiness, sukha. People need to gain a comprehensive, clear perspective of these matters, rather than practice avoidance and leave unresolved issues to fester in the mind. Moreover, if one is happy yet suffering still exists, then that happiness is not true and reliable. Therefore, the development of happiness implies that simultaneous reduction, removal, disappearance, and cessation of suffering. The expression, the development of happiness, can thus be replaced with the expression, cessation of suffering. These refers to one and the same process. And for the process to be complete, regardless of how much happiness a person may experience, one must reach the stage of the utter cessation of suffering. Technically speaking, to encounter the sense that the development of happiness is open-ended and without a clear end goal, it is referred to as the cessation of suffering. The term cessation, nirodha in Pali language, which is translated to the term that carries with it specific linguistic problems, and that its meaning is not altogether clear, and it may give rise to misunderstanding. When people hear the phrase cessation of suffering, they may understand that this refers to a gradual yet constant elimination and removal of suffering existing in the heart. In fact, the true meaning of nirodha refers to the non-arising of suffering, or to the complete and utter freedom from suffering. On the highest level, nirodha refers to nibbida, a state completely free from dukkha, free from suffering, free from stress, free from agitation. Occasionally, the term anupata nirodha is used, translated as sensation by means of non-arising, that is absolute or complete cessation. For the sake of convenience, we may thus translate dukkha nirodha as non-arising of suffering or freedom from suffering. Partly for ease of mind of listeners, when the subject is discussed, the term dukkha, suffering, is often avoided. Instead, the process is described as the development of happiness. Note, however, that by doing so, one is not neglecting the subject of dukkha, suffering, and eventually one will need to address it accordingly. The expression development of happiness necessarily implies the proper management of dukkha, of suffering. An essential aspect of dukkha, suffering, is one's attitude and relationship to it. If one fails to understand the importance of this point, then one will be unable to truly develop in sukha, happiness. Here we are referring to the duty or the responsibility, vice versa. If one gets this wrong, then one's entire spiritual practice will be misdirected and end failure. People often neglect this essential factor. As dukkha is the first noble truth of the Arya Satya, the Four Noble Truths, dukkha is the first one. Let us review the duties or responsibilities pertaining to all four of the Noble Truth. First, dukkha, a state of pleasure and affliction acting as the basis for human problems. Alternatively, anything that has the capacity to create problems. The associated responsibility here is parina, thorough or comprehensive understanding. The second, samudaya, the cause of dukkha, of suffering. The associated responsibility is pahana, abandoning, eliminating, or ending it, getting rid of it, getting rid of this dukkha. The third noble truth is nirodha, cessation of dukkha. The associated responsibility is satchikriya, realizing, seeing clearly, actualizing, or attaining. And finally, the fourth noble truth is magga, the path, the way leading to the end of dukkha. The associated responsibility is bhavana, cultivating, developing, practicing, or undertaking understanding, comprehension. Without going into lengthy analysis of these four responsibilities here, note, however, they are of fundamental importance. They exist inextricably paired with the Four Noble Truths, Arya Satya. For if one practices of one of the Four Noble Truths incorrectly in respect to its associated duty or responsibilities, one progress in the eternal law of Dhamma or Dharma will come to naught, and one's efforts will be in vain. It will be impossible to awaken or to realize the eternal law of Dhamma. In the respect of the first noble truth, in Pali, it states that with dukkha, with suffering, there should be thorough understanding. Dukkham pariniyam. With dukkha, with suffering, there should be thorough understanding. Dukkham pariniyam. Dukkha, suffering, must be understood by way of panya, by way of wisdom. Dukkha, suffering, is there to be understood. A simple example of this is that before one is able to solve a problem, one must first understand the nature of the problem. The definition of dukkha is not limited to the general concept of physical or mental pain and discomfort. The term also refers to anything that has the potential to create a sense of oppression when one fails to respond to it correctly. For this reason, the subject of dukkha, suffering, requires comprehensive understanding. In sum, or to sum it up, suffering, dukkha, is the matter to taken up and dealt with by wisdom, by panya, by sound judgment, by reflecting on it, using it is not something to be stored up or accumulated in the heart until it oozes out or goes rancid and one loses one's radiance and joy. If one encounters suffering, when welcome it with wisdom. Don't allow the mind to get caught up with it. And people informally say, don't obsess over your emotions. Don't burden or oppress the mind with suffering. And if the mind has already allowed it entry, don't let it smolder. Hasten to send it on to wisdom. If one simply stores up suffering within the heart, one suffers in vain. One does not dispel it, and one's life becomes stuck. Yet, if one allows the wisdom to deal with it, besides finding solutions to end it, one's whole life moves forward. It is not the mind's responsibility to deal with suffering. This responsibility rests with wisdom. The mind's task is not to bear suffering, but rather to apply wisdom. The practical agent in this matter is wisdom, which solves problems, which dispels suffering. Wisdom brings suffering to an end and at the same time generates happiness, sukha. The mind's responsibility is to witness happiness. One should develop the mind's proficiency for experiencing happiness and develop wisdom's ability to solve problems and dispel suffering. A healthy mind is endowed with happiness. A healthy wisdom is capable of dispelling suffering. For the mind is truly to be healthy and happy, wisdom must completely dispel suffering. Spiritual practice needs to be accurate by attending to the duty corresponding to each of the Four Noble Truths, Ariya Satcha. If one oppresses oneself by accumulating suffering, causes internal distress, frustration, and depression, one is responding to suffering incorrectly. Instead, one needs to change course and summon wisdom to help. Happiness, sukha, is classified as part of the third noble truth, nirodha, cessation. It is recognized that there is a relative degree of happiness which needs to be developed until one reaches supreme happiness. The responsibility here is satchikiriya, to realize. That's your responsibility, to realize it. To actualize or to perfect happiness. This development of happiness should be attended to as a regular and constant pair to parts of one's life. The ability to be happy is the starting point of spiritual practice. For this reason, one needs to establish oneness correctly from the onset, so that one goes in the right direction and proceeds with confidence. B, practice being free from suffering. So the application to be free from dukkha. The spiritual journey begins with the understanding of happiness. As one progresses along the journey, there is another key principle that directly benefits one's practice. This practice has to do with how one relates to happiness, and also how it pertains inherently to one's relationship to suffering. In the Devadatta Sutra, Gautama Buddha outlines this method of practice in regard to happiness. It contains 4 factors. The first factor, to refrain from creating extra suffering for oneself. The second factor, to not forsake righteous happiness. The third factor, to not indulge in any sort of happiness, even righteous happiness. And finally, the fourth factor, to strive in order to bring an end to the cause of suffering, to strive in order to realize higher forms of happiness, all the way up to supreme happiness. It is common for people to create unnecessary suffering for themselves. They may be abiding in a state of well-being, free from distress, yet still inflict suffering on themselves. Examples of these are those people who drink excessive amounts of alcohol or indulge in addictive drugs. Many of them start out healthy yet still consume these things, even though they clearly know that they are harmful, both physically, mentally, psychologically, and emotionally. Although they possess this knowledge, they create suffering and problems. On the more subtle level, people often gather and accumulate various sense impressions like sights, sounds, and are slightly bothersome or annoying. Trivial things done or said by others, things that are a part of the past that are stored up in people's minds. Later, when they are alone, they dig up these things and proliferate over them, causing misery and unhappiness. This is another example of piling up suffering on oneself. In the respect of the householder, the layman and laywoman, it is not considered blameworthy to have such a degree of mental proliferation to elaborate on one's experiences. But the encouragement is to think in the positive rather than the negative ways. Negative mental proliferations are called akusala dhamma, unwholesome formation. Apunya api sankara, which are marked by greed, marked by hatred, marked by delusion, and which generates suffering. Sati, mindfulness, should be applied here as the restraint. In order to cease thinking in the negative ways, instead one thinks in wholesome ways and creates positive mental formations. Punya api sankara, beginning with pamocha, joy. Remember, joy is then followed by piti, so pamota first. Joy, then we get bliss, piti, and then pasati, tranquility, calmness, release. This is the way to solve problems and generate sukha, happiness. Gautama Buddha described the aesthetic practices of the Niganta, the Jaina sect, who clearly inflicted suffering on themselves. Instead of using a blade to shave their heads, they used tweezers to pull out each hair one at a time. They devised all sorts of strategies to increase suffering. They would drive nails or thorns to their sleeping platforms and lie on these. They will abstain from food and water for long periods. In the cold season, they would immerse in chilly rivers. In the hot seasons, they would stand out in the blazing sun. Gautama Buddha described these practices as self-mortifications as example for self-inflicted suffering. These are examples from history. The reader can think of the comparable ways in which modern people unnecessarily pile suffering onto themselves. Righteous happiness can be found in everyday situations. Take the example for the householder, the lay people, laymen, laywomen who earn their living honestly. They use their money for enjoyment and to support their family and dependents, according to the teaching on the four kinds of happiness of householders, Giri Sukha. The happiness of having wealth, the happiness of spending wealth, the happiness of being free from debt, and the happiness from performing virtuous and blameless deeds. Of performing deeds good by way of body, performing good deeds by way of speech, performing good deeds by way of mind, sukha, happiness that caused no harm to anyone. This kind of righteous happiness should not be neglected or forsaken. There are numerous kinds of righteous happiness. There is the happiness stemming from dana, generosity or charity, sila, moral conduct or virtue, pavana, cultivation of the mind, concentration. There's the elevated happiness of developing tranquility meditation, samatha bhavana. Insight meditation, vipassana bhavana. Alternatively, there is happiness of loving kindness, compassion, or the happiness of the four principles of service, sankha vatu. These kinds of happiness should not be renounced or objected to. Those people who adhere to the doctrine of extreme asceticism aim to inflict more suffering on themselves, and they thus shun happiness. Non-indulgent in any form of happiness is the vital factor and indicates an advanced spiritual level of development. Experiencing righteousness forms of happiness is already an excellent step in the spiritual practice, but problems can arise due to such happiness. Namely, people may get attached to or blindly absorbed in it. This attachment or indulgence leads to laziness, heedlessness, and decline. One who is able to escape from this pitfall has reached an important stage in practice. When one has reached this stage, happiness is unable to dominate the mind. First, one does not fall into heedlessness, apamato. Happiness does not become harmful influence. Second, one does not lose one's dependence. One is not enslaved by happiness. Third, one has the opportunity to develop higher forms of happiness. The effort to bring an end to the cause of suffering leads to perfect happiness. As long as the source of or seed, the foundation of suffering remains, there's still the potential for suffering to resurface. Suffering is still latent. At this stage, happiness is still imperfect. Here, the cause of suffering must be completely eliminated. This final factor explains why the term cessation of suffering is so widely used. It points clearly to definitely to the unnecessary task. As stated earlier, the expression development of happiness is used, but it is open-ended. It does not clearly indicate the final goal of practice. Although this is the process can be described in both the positive and the negative way, only a negating description is decisive and clear. Suffering is completely removed, with perfect happiness remaining. The expression to strive in order to bring an end indicates how the elimination of cause of suffering goes hand in hand with effort. The causes for suffering do not necessarily vanish immediately. Rather, one gradually reduces greed, gradually reduces hatred, gradually reduces delusion, gradually weakens craving, gradually weakens conceit, and gradually weakens fixed views and ideas. In this way, one practices according to Magga, the path, by developing virtuous conduct, sila, concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. Mental defilements, kilesas, and asavas diminish with avijja, ignorance, decreases. Relatively speaking, this is the same as gradually increasing sukha, happiness. The fourth factor can thus be paraphrased as the development of happiness for the sake of clarity. One adds the qualification to develop happiness in perfection. Parama sukha. This is the way that either definition in the parentheses states to strive in order to realize higher forms of happiness, all the way to supreme happiness, parama sukha. This is the fourth factor to be fulfilled. One must link it with the third factor of not indulging in any form of sukha, not getting stuck, acting needlessly, abandoning oneself to some form of pleasure, or ceasing to make effort. The fulfillment of the third factor enables one to reach the fourth factor and reach spiritual perfection. Parama sukha. Another way of describing the proper relationship to sukha is to focus on the four factors of spiritual practice. First, heedfulness. This factor applies to everyone. It is important to As a reminder, because happiness induces fascination, captivation, procrastination, inertia, laziness, and carelessness. One thus needs to take care not to fall into heedlessness. History shows us that almost every successful person, family, society, nation, or even civilization have reached a level of prosperity and growth tends to become indulgent and careless, eventually falls into ruin and destruction. This is the critical issue for families. And parents must take great care. Even the supreme virtue of loving kindness can be excessive in the case when parents pamper and pander their children and do not apply equanimity, upeka, as the balancing force. Eventually, their children become weak, careless, indulgent, emotionally stunted, and unable to face the challenges of life. The family will consequently be undermined and ruined. This is true also for individuals. At first, one may strive to establish oneself in the world, yet one is wealthy and happy. One may become indulgent and heedless, eventually falling into decline. And someone should beware against carelessness in regard to the state of happiness. Taking favorable opportunities when one encounters suffering, one generally feels oppressed, stifled, and obstructed. Everything one does feels difficult. A great effort is required. The advantages to the stage of obstruction and difficulty, however, is precisely because of the need for the increased effort in face of suffering. As a result, there is a learning, training, and development. When one acts appropriately in response to suffering, one grows and reaches great success. The Pali term of sukha, happiness, can also be translated as fluent, smooth, convenient, or easy. The definition of sukha in Sanskrit could be said to be sukha and mean originally having a good axe hole, running swiftly and easily. That's the definition in Sanskrit. So having a hole in a good axle hole and running swiftly and easily. When things are convenient, smooth, and easy and should hasten to accomplish necessary deeds, when one experiences happiness, one should use valuable opportunity for getting those things. Using this opportunity to act better than allowing happiness to lure one into the trap of enchantment, of fixation, and only lead to indulgence in heedlessness. With the assistance by firmly established wisdom, one goes to the opposite direction of using the opportunity provided by happiness to strive to get things done. This generates even greater spiritual growth and development. One who has developed in this way is able to derive benefit from both happiness and suffering. Indeed, the term Dhamma practitioner implies the ability to use yoniso manasikara, wise reflection, to discern the advantages in every situation, to think in such ways. There is happiness. Good conditions are easy, convenient, smooth. This provides an opportunity to accomplish things to the utmost. There is suffering. Good conditions are challenging. I need to make a great effort. Bring them on. I will proceed undaunted. Independence or freedom is the goal of Buddhism. True independence is founded on freedom of heart, mental freedom. A prominent feature of this mental freedom is freedom in relationship to happiness. Independence follows on from the first factor of heedfulness, of not being dominated and led astray by happiness. The first factor, however, is one of negation, of countering the urge to indulge, whereas the fourth factor passes beyond to a level of inner freedom. Those who are spiritually developed and endowed with happiness, but they remain unattached to this happiness. Those who are fully developed experience free, independent happiness, yet are in no way bound to relying on this happiness. For those individuals still in training, establishing this independence permits them to develop further. Further development, however, this refers to the recognition that one still needs to make progress in one's spiritual practice. These four factors work together in harmony. They lead to supreme happiness and to the complete removal of the source of dukkha, of suffering. On both abides in happiness and develops happiness. One experiences happiness throughout the entire process of spiritual development. And then part C, happiness in the household. Now, for the sake of practical application, it is useful to look at the aspects of happiness of the Buddha often mentioned as sense pleasure, kama sukha. Happiness in society and happiness in spiritual development. The Buddha spoke at length on the subject of sense pleasure because it pertains to everyone in the world. Kama sukha, sense pleasure, stems from contact, basa, by way of the sense doors, either the ear, the eye, the nose, the touch, the taste, or tactile objects, by way of the doors, the sense doors, ayatana. It refers to the sense engagement and dependent on material things. It is the happiness of obtaining something for its own personal consumption. The improper response to this mismanagement of sense pleasure, kama sukha, is the source of myriad of problems in the world, both personal and social, including interpersonal conflict, competition, and persecution. If one is to solve human problems effectively, one must address this issue. One must encourage people to develop wisdom in order to manage sense desire and sense pleasure correctly. At the very least, the advantages of engagement with sense pleasure should outweigh the harm. In any case, the subject of sense pleasure has been covered at length, either in this chapter. Here, let us suffice simply to mention it as one aspect of happiness, heightened by the Buddha. The second kind of happiness, happiness in society, is derived from friendship, goodwill, living together with kindness and compassion. The two primary sets of principles pertaining to this form of happiness are the four divine abidings, the Brahma Viharas. Remember, the four bases of social solidarity, Sangha Tavatu. Moreover, if one wishes for society or a democracy to be truly stable, one needs to foster the six virtues conducive to communal life. Saraniya Dhamma. The primary emphasis on this kind of happiness focuses on the divine abidings, which have been explained above. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha, the four Brahma, the abidings. Here, for the sake of practical application, we looked at the key symbol of how these mental states exist in family situations. Beginning with happiness of parents when they witness the well-being of happiness of their children. Parents are often used as an example for explaining the four divine abidings. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha. Loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. Because this is their nature for parents to possess these qualities, mothers in particular epitomize these qualities are thus used as standards in scriptural explanation. Mothers wish for the children to be happy, healthy, and content, free from pain and illness. To see her child happy fulfills a basic wish for the mother, which in turn makes her happy. This wish for the child to be happy and healthy is called loving kindness, metta. If the child falls ill, parents will be anxious and concerned. They will strive to treat the illness, find a cure, and restore the child to good health. They will not feel happy until the child is cured. When the child completely recovers from illness, the parents are satisfied. Their wishes have been fulfilled, and they experience happiness. This wish for the child to be free from suffering and recover a state of well-being is called karuna, compassion. If the child grows up well in A physically attractive and graceful excels in his or her studies, finds good work and promoted in a good position, the child prospers and thrives. The parents are delighted and wish for the child to blossom and succeed is fulfilled. This wish for the child to thrive and discover even greater happiness and share rejoicing when this wish is fulfilled is called appreciative joy, mudita. According to most people, the parents are now fully endowed with virtuous qualities. But according to the four divine abidings, completion has not yet been reached. The parents can comfort their children, but they have not yet truly helped them grow. The children are not yet truly mature, or one can even say that the children are not grown up. They will remain dependent on their parents for emotional support. One needs to remember the fourth factor of upeka, equanimity. In this case, that children need to learn how to take responsibility for their lives and their actions. Parents must let go and refrain from acting on behalf of their children. Instead, they should stand back and watch their children lead their own lives in their own fashion. The parents do not interfere and meddle in their children's lives. This upeka, equanimity, begins already when the child first learns how to stand, all the way up to the time that they leave the home, get married, and look after their own families. At this time, when children leave home and start their own families, parents are discouraged from borrowing into the children's new homes and interfering in their affairs. They should refrain from trying to organize and rearrange their children's lives. Otherwise, they become a source of suffering for their children, creating conflict and discomfort for them and their spouses. When one recognizes that one's children are grown up and that time has come for them to look after themselves, one steps back and observes. If one sees that they require some help or support, or one provides assistance, one doesn't abandon them. One still offers guidance and advice, but one refrains from interfering too much. This wish for the child to abide in a correct and purposeful way, to not behave in a faulty or errant manner, and to live righteously, while the parent maintains dispassion, objectivity, impartiality, is called upeka, equanimity. This factor of upeka, equanimity, needs to be emphasized. Many people misunderstand it and thus do not know how to apply it effectively. Upeka, equanimity, is the link between emotions and knowledge. It is the balance point between love and insight, the meeting point between the citta, the mind, and wisdom, panya. In regard to the first three divine abidings, it is recommended to combine this with panya, wisdom, so that they lead to beneficial results. But in everyday life, it is not always certain that panya, wisdom, will play a participatory role. Take an example. It is possible to love without being wise. Upeka, equanimity, however, stems directly from panya, from wisdom. It cannot arise accompanied by wisdom. Equanimity without, so upeka without panya is fake, is counterfeit. Equanimity may be referred as stupid indifference. So to apply upeka, equanimity, you have to also apply wisdom, panya. Otherwise, it's called stupid indifference. With the balancing influence of equanimity, the practice of by parents, but the first three divine abiding helps children to develop emotionally and promotes mental health. The children will be able to feel love, goodwill, and compassion. But if things are imbalanced by the absence of upeka, equanimity, parents simply coddle the children, which makes them weak and dependent on others. If the parents are strongly prejudiced in favor of their children, the children will become demanding and spoiled. They will expect others to please them. They will be unable to sympathize with other people. Indeed, upeka, equanimity, is the driving force in spiritual development, particularly in regard to intelligence, regard to fortitude, regard to skill, and regard to sense of responsibility. Although it is both normal and necessary for parents to apply upeka, equanimity, when raising their children, they are often not aware of this quality, do not know how to benefit from it in the maximum way. Take an example. A mother who loves her infant son dearly and nurses and feeds him. Yet in order for the child to grow up, it is appropriate for him to learn how to use a spoon, use a fork, use a bowl, etc., be able to look after himself. One day, the mother knows that it's time for the child to learn how to feed himself. She teaches him how to use a spoon and lets him learn from trial and error. She lets go and observes his progress. She repeats a similar lesson for peeling a banana or peeling an apple. This is upeka, equanimity. Parents then ask themselves, what should our children be able to do? What skills should they master? They continue to apply upeka, equanimity, by presenting their child with tasks and challenges and offering advice. Then they let go, observing how the child stand on their own feet. Eventually, the child becomes proficient in many areas. If parents only express kindness and compassion, the child will tend to remain passive. If they combine these qualities with upeka, equanimity, their child will become observant and industrious. When parents express only kindness and compassion, they experience the immediate temporary satisfaction of seeing their child happy. But if they can also apply upeka, equanimity, their happiness will be long-lasting because they will witness the child's ongoing progress and success. Parenting is a model example of how to develop happiness on a social level. Parents and other leaders and guides in society need to cultivate these 4 divine abidings. In particular, the factor of upeka, equanimity. Equanimity calls the truth and correctness. It encompasses a desire for loved ones to establish in rectitude, righteousness, and impeccability. This is the supreme form of desire, chanta. And thus, this desire, chanta, is fulfilled. One experiences a profound and abiding happiness. When individual homes and families live happily and are established in righteousness and in principles, they act as core units for helping to create prosperous, happy, and civilized society. That's the end of part 1.